Hi, Jenny. Thanks for coming. I need a friend right now. It's okay, Mom. Exams are only in a month. How are things at the university? I haven't seen or spoken to you in months. You know how it happens, Mom. It's my last year at university and I'm working my ass off to get into the top 10%. There are wolf laws in this world, especially in jurisprudence. But I thought you were going to work for your father. Yes, actually, I have already started, but I want him to be able to say that he hired me because I was one of the best students, and not just because I am his daughter. As for me, I will work for him not because he is my father, but because his law firm is the best in these parts. I know I won't get any special treatment from him. On the contrary, I expect to be given the crappiest job, something equivalent to cleaning a pigsty only for lawyers. There was silence between the two women before the older one broke it with a snort. And yet, will it kill you if you call once a week? Jenny looked at her mother for a long time before answering. Perhaps, but, well, we were never what I would call close, Mom, were we? Be honest. No, Margaret sighed. You have always been Daddy's girl. Jenny flinched at her mother's soft, accusatory tone. Don't you dare try to blame the lack of our closeness on me, Mom. If I'm a Daddy's girl, it's because you— Jenny paused, searching for the right term, have been emotionally absent from my life for almost as long as I can remember. The older woman lowered her eyes as she realized some of the truth in her daughter's well-chosen words, but it was simply not in Margaret's character to admit guilt. I damn it worked too, you know? I was the chairman of the parents' committee while you were in school. I have led and still lead several charities. I have the same successful career as your father. Just because I don't make a lot of money doesn't mean my career isn't important. She sat down, knowing that anger and dredging up old problems would not help her achieve her goals. Jenny felt no such restrictions. You didn't have to do any of that, Mom. No matter how good the reasons, you chose it yourself. And let's face it, you did it more for your own self-aggrandizement than to do anything good for others. You were supposed to be in charge of everything. Remember, you left the parent committee when someone else was elected chairman. If you were honest with yourself, you would know that you have retained your chairmanship of most of the charities you run because Dad or his partners donate most of the money they have. Now it was Jenny's turn to realize that there was no point in stirring up old coals, saying what she really wanted to say, that she would rather have her mother with her instead of all this. What was the point in telling my mother that? Did she spend most of her childhood feeling like just another annoying detail for her mother to organize? She had never listened before. Express bitter the truth may have been a pointless exercise, but she couldn't stand by and listen to her father being criticized. Sorry, Mom, but it's true. It was my dad who went with me to all my sports activities after school. It was Dad who I could talk to when I needed a shoulder to lean on. Dad, who helped with homework and taught me to ride a bike and drive a car. It was Dad in everything. You just weren't there, physically or emotionally. You were, how can I describe it? Distant, unavailable. No, it's not fair, Jenny. I'm warm. Ask anyone. It is your father who is so cold, completely insensitive. This is nonsense, Mom. Dad is a lawyer and they, just like doctors and psychiatrists, cannot afford to become emotionally involved with their clients. It would destroy them. He still experiences all the feelings that a well-adjusted person experiences, but he must control them, hide them. You must learn early in your training to separate emotions and actions. So sometimes it was difficult for him to switch when he came home. To me, it just proves that he is human. Well, I'm starting to think you're a sociopath. The older woman blushed deeply. Sociopath? How dare Jenny? For God's sake, she was doing charity work, charitable organizations that helped people. She was a humanitarian. With difficulty, Margaret managed to overcome her anger reflex. She needed a friend right now, and after her husband's actions last week, she had very few of them. Being an extremely competitive person, Margaret did not have the personal qualities that would allow her to make many close friends, but rather acquaintances, competitors. Her closest confidant was her sister, who called her and told her about the photos and videos Dave had shown her. Pictures of her dirty dancing in the club, almost clothed sex on the dance floor. The camera then follows her and a guy 20 years her junior to the door of a motel room. No, it didn't prove that she had sex outside of marriage, but it was obvious that this was what was going to happen. Her sister ranted about her disgusting behavior until Margaret couldn't stand it anymore and hung up. No, being righteously angry right now would be very counterproductive. There was silence for several long seconds before Jenny broke the awkward silence. "So, what did you want to talk about, Mom? I have to say, you look like crap. Your father abandoned me, Jen." "I know, Mom. He told me." The silence fell for another long, drawn-out pause. "He also told me why, Mom." The elderly woman's gaze dropped to the table and remained there. Even though she felt how she was perceived by others, she desperately hoped Dave didn't tell the rest of the family. It's enough that he showed the video to her sister. Margaret felt stumped. How much had Dave revealed to their daughter? Not knowing how much Jennifer knew made the voluntary confession somewhat problematic. For her part, Jennifer expected her mother to be honest and open with her for the first time in her life. She was disappointed. Again. Jennifer sighed. When she spoke, her voice was neutral, calm, reflecting her legal training. "I'll tell you what Dad told me. He found out that you were cheating on him and set you up. He pretended that he was away on a business trip for 3 days and 2 nights. Instead, he wandered around the city and watched you. He thought you would at least wait until the second night, but he said you left before the plane he was supposed to take arrived. He followed you into that club across town and saw you accepting drinks from the third guy who approached you. What was wrong with the first 2, Mom? Too old at 30. Her mother didn't take the bite. She continued to look down. He watched the guy buy you drinks and your dirty dancing performance. He followed you to the next motel, watched you check in, watched you head to your room. How did you feel when Dad tapped you on the shoulder while you were kissing the guy outside the room? Dad told me he went to take off your wedding and engagement rings, but they weren't there." Jenny snorted. "What do you think, Mom? What, after taking off the rings, you became unmarried again?" "My God," thought her mother. "This is so awkward." Indeed, this moment was the worst in her hidden life. To look away from the kiss that was supposed to be a prelude to a night of pleasure. To look into the calm eyes of her husband, with whom she had lived for 28 years. She could still hear his slightly choked voice saying with unshakable determination, "Goodbye, Margaret." His words, that voice, they made her numb and numb until Dave disappeared. Only when Dave was out of sight did instinct kick in. An awkward run in high heels to her car, and the squeal of tires on the way home. The cop pulling her over, the breathalyzer test, and the subsequent trip to the police station for processing simply sealed the death of her reputation and loss of leadership positions in addition to the dissolution of her marriage. By the time the taxi brought her home, Dave was long gone. Losing everything that was important to her made maintaining her relationship with her only child even more important. How could she turn this to her advantage? Even though she was smart enough to understand that the excuse, "I was lonely, I allowed myself to be seduced, this has never happened before," was inappropriate. She had been a lawyer's wife for 28 years. She didn't need anyone on the outside to tell her that a married woman walking into a club alone, without rings, had proven her intention. What did Jenny say? Dave found out that she's cheating. How? She's always been very careful. How did your father find out? Her daughter sighed, disappointed that what was currently bothering her mother was the way her infidelity was discovered. Perhaps foolishly, she was hoping for some remorse for her actions from the woman who gave birth to her. "Do you remember that 2-day trip that Dad took about a month ago?" He came home and went to the toilet in the bathroom. Under the toilet seat, where only the guy would see, someone stuck a note. The note said he picked up what he thought was a lonely woman. Well, she wasn't wearing any rings, and escorted her to her home for a fun night. In the morning, he realized that a man, probably his husband, was obviously also living in the room. He felt ashamed, left a note where the woman would never have found it if she hadn't cleaned the toilet, and ran away before the woman, woke up. Honestly, this note gives me, as a woman, peace of mind. It's nice to know that there are still decent people in the world. Crap. Damn. Damn, Margaret thought. One fucking night I was so horny that I brought a guy here because there was a huge conference in town, and all the motel rooms were so full that even the chosen partner had to share a double room with another salesman from his company, and I was hooked a guy with a conscience. How can I spin this? You know, Mother. Jennifer's use of the word mother instead of mama made Margaret wince in anticipation of what was to follow. I can't help but think that you've been doing this for years. I remember from about the time I was 6, every time Dad left town on business, you sent me to Grandma. Have you really been cheating on your dad for so long? You call him an insensitive bastard, but he must really love you if he hasn't noticed it all these years. Only love can make someone so blind. Margaret's gaze fell to the floor and stayed there. Her inability to deny anything was deafening. How could she fix this situation? None of the family and friends she and Dave had answered her calls. She was called to 2 urgent meetings at organizations where she volunteered later that week. It's not hard to guess what all this means. Then there was the prenuptial agreement she and Dave signed, devastating the partner who cheated. Of course, she would not be completely destitute, but her comfortable existence would be a thing of the past. The certified letter to vacate my home just arrived today. She needed a friend. She needed support, now more than ever. Various plans of attack, words of justification flashed through her head. None stood up to even the most superficial scrutiny. But he had to be. After all, Jennifer was her own flesh and blood. Of course, she didn't breastfeed her. Was it really that bad that she didn't want her breasts to sag and lose their fullness like her sisters? Was it really that bad to want them to stay cocky for as long as possible? Plus, she held the bottle most of the time. Mother, you have been served. With a neutral expression on her face, Jennifer Brown stood up, calmly unbuttoned her jacket, and pulled out a manila envelope. For a split second, Margaret wondered how she could have missed the extra bulk on her daughter's usually slender figure. Jennifer was in no hurry. Her movements were slow and deliberate. She kept looking at her mother. She placed the folder on the table in front of her mother. Jennifer's movements quickened, as if she was afraid of missing the moment. She pulled her phone out of her purse and quickly snapped a photo of the shocked woman across from her. Then she left. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.